It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here at the Voice of Reason podcast. My gosh.
Welcome to season 4, everybody. Has anything happened? Has anything happened?
I don't think. I've actually seen a bunch of tweets that have made me laugh. It's like the AP government, teachers this next year that are just like rubbing their hands at what they've got cooked up. This is television drama. Like, this is...
You can't write a movie script for this.
An HBO Emmy Award-winning script that you legitimately couldn't write up better, and unfortunately it's because of that is why people are saying the things that they are saying about all of it. And
man,
wow.
I've never been, not to jump this is my 1981. I was 6 years old. Last time anything even remotely close with a president and a gun in the same.
That was Reagan, correct?
That was Reagan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say, in your opinion, I've only seen videos of the Reagan incident.
Yeah.
But, who are you more surprised at failing? This is one of the craziest things. We were millimeters away from, I hate being graphic about it, but watching Trump's head explode on live TV.
That would have been the craziest thing ever. With Ronald Reagan, just to do a quick comparison, where he was coming out of a building. It wasn't like he was walking across the yard and getting into a car.
Mm-hmm. Walking
out of a building, getting into his car, and I guess John Hinckley, it wasn't like he was brandishing his weapon out. He had it on his person. He was in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
This, dear God in heaven, this was unbelievable. Just the lack of just the lack of intelligence, the lack of planning. This was, you can't even begin to imagine what kind of failures this was. Yeah, you said millimeters, and the fact that he just went from like this to like this was, the thing that saved his life. Now we're, saddened that one man had lost his life and another one had seriously injured. What this is one of those things where I was like, I remember where I was at. I was actually up watching a concert on the town square. One of my buddies who I used to DJ with, he was doing and my phone buzzed. And I'd saw some TikToks earlier of people who were live at the rally, and I was like, oh yeah, good for you. Hey, go get indoctrinated. And then I see this and I'm like, what? And it was kind of weird because I had AP and Fox both come up with, AP comes up with the story. It says, loud banging noises at Trump rally, details to follow. And then 30 seconds later, Fox says attempted assassination of Donald Trump. just how the two reported it, like, oh, it's nothing, and it's, you know, the initial response was pretty alarming. Where were you? What was your initial thoughts when you heard of it? Where were you at?
I was watching it live.
Were you really?
I was watching it live. So we, for those that don't, if you have a Samsung TV, if you have it connected to the internet, like a Samsung Smart TV, they have Samsung TV Plus, which is one of the most underrated like streaming services. Basically, it's like free, very generic cable, but it's like kind of like free cable. There's a bunch of, it's like Tubi, but without needing to set anything up. It's great. And there's like a dozen different PBS stations on it. Like CNN has some channels, but PBS has one. And like my dad and I were in the living room and just casually like flipping through channels, and he had just started to speak at the rally, and so we just left it on, and my dad was kind of on his phone, and I'm watching, and then all of a sudden I legitimately, he turned his head, and then I see the ear grab, and then go again, and then he ducks, and I watched it, and I was just like, did someone just try to shoot him? Like legit.
Yeah.
It took me a second, and then I just sat there and watched it, and it took a few minutes to kind of register like what legitimately had just happened. And what was crazy is, so I remember I texted you guys, you and Travis, and just said, hey, like, this just happened. But then after everything happened, and we kept the news on, and they were talking about, hey, we're pushing people out of here. There was, I don't know if we were still on PBS, but they go to like one of their B reporters. Clearly, they just like, if there's an extra person with a mic and a camera, they are talking to anybody that's on site.
Right.
And this guy goes up to this dude who's, you know, kind of like got this like Guy Fieri hair.
Yeah, the BBC guy.
And yeah, so it was BBC. So we switched over. So we're on BBC, and the guy just does that interview where he legit just breaks it down. Like, we saw this dude. We saw him up there. We're waving down at cops. We're hollering at him. He goes right up there. And at first, you know, you could tell the interviewer is kind of like, like, are you sure? And then the guy's like, no, they shot his brains out. And they're like, whoa, careful what you say. He's like, no, I saw the whole thing. And it was nuts.
Let me stop just with that report. If that dude wasn't, I'm sure something else would have come out sooner or later. Mm-hmm. But if that dude is not interviewed live on television, how much do you think we would have known, or when would we have known of what actually happened? That dude being interviewed on live TV, who saw the whole thing. I mean, that's the Zapruder film for the Kennedy assassination, like live on television.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it really did, like, so the guy, you know, he talks about it, and then that's when you start seeing a lot of the photos come out. You start seeing, like, the photos of the building, you see the guy's body, you start seeing all the stuff, and then all the comments are like, oh, that guy was not full of shit. Like, everything that he said was legit.
Yeah.
And then the reports of all these things that started to come out, you know, were still allegedly, and again, I'd have to go back and deep dive and reread, but I saw a thing where it was like a police officer stuck his head up there on the roof, and the guy pointed his rifle at him, so he ducked down. And then, I mean, how much time went by between that? Like, so some cop knew that a guy was up there with a rifle, and just in the confusion, did him calling it up, you know, did nobody pay attention? Like again, so many balls dropped. And we'll probably get into it next week as we learn more. But like you said right before we got on, they are grilling it's the head of the Secret Service, correct?
Yeah, we'll play a few clips from that. We're recording this a little bit early, but I've got a few clips queued up. This woman, and we're hearing this new term DEI, diversity. What is it? Diversity, something, inclusion.
Let's find out.
And so what we're seeing in, the fact that, and
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're getting we want to get everybody hired in every position, whether it's, and we've heard about this with airline pilots, we've heard about this with, everybody from executives to, and that's great. There are certain jobs that I believe, man, you let a woman just do it. I mean, I've met women construction workers. I've met women truck drivers. I've met women, security guards. But one of the early things that I heard about with this DEI thing and with hiring women in the Secret Service, man, when you see the video, it was the perfect storm for the Secret Service. The mics were still hot on the platform when the Secret Service was getting those guys, when they were getting Trump off the platform. And the thing that is coming up that you hear is the woman's voice. Where are we going? What are we doing? Where are we going? What are we doing? You're a military man. You guys last week did your training and everything were you part of like the mass earthquake training thing or whatever that was?
No, we were doing something different.
But regardless, you guys have been trained. The reason why you guys go through such extensive training is when whatever emergency or situation presents itself, you know what to do, right? You're right there. You're boom. But so that's the beginning of the Secret Service's problem. That mic's hot. No, to me, yes, it's an intense, hyped up moment. But when they stand Donald Trump up, and that woman standing in front, she's not tall enough to cover the president. Your job is to take one for the team. That's your job. You're going to take one for the team. And thank goodness, we're not Trump fans, but I don't want to see the death of any public official anywhere in the world. Okay? And I don't advocate that at all. But your job is to take one for the team. And if you can't you're not supposed to be in the job. And just a lot of the balls that were dropped here. Before we get into the testimony here, and we'll discuss some of I've got 4 clips pulled up of the testimony. But number one, the biggest thing that I see the failure of, that everybody's asking the question is, the building that is less than 150 yards away, a little bit over a football field, with a slope roof, with nobody on it. How does a person get up on that roof and have clear line of sight at the president? That blows my mind. And then you have every video angle that, you have the people saying, there he is, there he is, there he is, and local law enforcement running around. The cop sticking his head back over the top of the edge of the roof, and the kid turning the gun on him. I mean, if I was the cop, I probably would have dropped too. But you are talking about the president. I mean, who's going to be the faster draw? I
don't even think it was him like dropping, obviously like, oh shit, this guy's got a gun, goes down. I think it was the lack of response from that. Like there were several minutes had then gone by.
Right.
Like, which is crazy. Like, you're in a situation where if something like that happens, if a guy that close to a presidential rally swings a gun at you, that's not we're going to try to get him. It's, you need to get him off stage now. Like, you need to get him, you have to radio that up the chain, and then it didn't happen.
Well, that's the other drop ball, because you had state police on one frequency, You had county guys on another frequency. You had local guys on one frequency, and you had the Secret Service on another frequency. I saw that on Rogan the other day. Rogan was talking about that. You had 4 different frequencies, and I'm like, there's,
which to me makes sense. As far as to keep some of those channels clear, but it also makes sense that, hey, if you're going to have one for each of these different things, then you have to have another channel that's relaying the information from the other 4.
Well,
so if you have your local PD's like, hey, we got a guy with a rifle on the roof over here, that needs to be relayed to the Secret Service,
right?
Like, yeah, that is again just such a
when I worked for the Corps of Engineers, okay, and I did my summer internship as a river ranger up at Quincy. So we had our radios in our truck, in our patrol trucks, and we basically had 3 channels on the radio. We had the lock and dam frequency. We had 4 channels. We had one that was for the river, all the river traffic. We could tune in on the river traffic. We could tune in to the lock and dam to communicate with them if we needed to. And we could communicate with each other. And then we had this other one that was called mutual aid. A mutual aid channel, which your 911 dispatch keeps that, they cycle through all that. And to me, I'm like, okay, did they not have a mutual aid channel that they could have just said, okay, somebody's monitoring this? To me, we can break that over all we want to, but I think that was just one thing. The fact that, and you're more into the weapon scene than I am. The fact that an AR, what's an AR? What I'm hearing 400 or 500. An AR is good up to about 400 or 500 yards, right? Something like that.
Yeah, like, God, I'm gonna get grilled because it's been a while, but the maximum efficient range of a M4. But I know that, like, in training, right, like, I'm pretty sure 300 meters is like the farthest target that you're like trying to hit. But 150 meters, like, I mean, if you're in training, like, those are the ones like you should be hitting frequently. But God, the maximum effective range, it's much farther, but like realistically, you're not going to be shooting that.
No, but I mean, and so the fact that this kid, and that's another area that I want to get to here in a second, but this kid who was kicked off the rifle team for not allowed to be on the rifle team in his high school because he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Right. Well, okay, so the effective firing range, 500 meters. The maximum firing range is 3,600 meters. 36.
So that's,
I mean, a lot of length. Now, realistically, you're not going to be,
But still,
yeah.
Wouldn't you? And I've always thought this, and this is just another terrible question. But I mean, when every president, I've always thought this: when the president is sworn in and gives his inaugural address on the steps of the Capitol, and the mall, if you've ever been to the mall there in Washington, D.C., I mean, that mall goes way back. I mean, if you had a high enough power sniper rifle, I would think that they had to have, I mean, when they do the inaugural address, they obviously have all the buildings around, but I'm like, could they have somebody? I mean, the guy who did American Sniper, and I think he holds the record for the world's farthest snipe, right? It was like a mile. It's like over a mile. I know, maybe, I saw that. I've seen that clip 1,000 times, but I didn't know how far away he was.
Oh, well, apparently it's been broken by a Mr. Kowalski spanning 12,468 feet, covered a distance greater than 2 Brooklyn bridges in approximately 9 seconds. The Ukrainian sniper who killed a Russian soldier from a record 3.8 kilometers, around 2.3 miles.
God.
Who is a 58-year-old ex-businessman. Wow.
Wow, good for him. But see, and so that was one of the questions that was asked today is like, why not expand this zone out? And the director says, okay, hey, we didn't know anything about this. Would you have allowed the president to come up on stage at the time? Well, if we would have known about it, no, we wouldn't have allowed. Well, he's like, you did know about it 20 minutes ahead of time. Why didn't you grab this? Why didn't you get this? And so, man, this is one of those things that somebody has to answer for. Somebody has to be able to. Jeez, I'm.
And what's crazy is, as we were listening to that, I pulled up this video by Representative Eli Crane, and he's on the roof of that building where the assassination attempt took place, and like he's doing like a 360 as he's walking through. Like, people from the ground could have seen this guy. This is ridiculous how pretty open this area is. So the fact that this individual was up there, and I talked to a lot of Army guys about this while we were gone, just kind of about what some of our thoughts were, and very clearly there had to have been a very weak chain in their perimeter. Like, and I'm not meaning like a physical link fence. I'm just talking about this perimeter that was set up. And it all just depends on, like, again, here's the thing too, is there's a lot of flack being put on the Secret Service. And yes, obviously the Secret Service dropped the ball, but we're also putting not enough blame on local PD, state PD, the local sheriff's department, whoever was there to maintain physical security dropped the ball hard on this. And yeah, just looking at that footage, we had talked about it. There's the video of, I believe it's the police sniper that ended up shooting back and killing the shooter, where he's at, like, in regards to Trump. He's kind of on a stand, and there were a lot of people like giving this guy a ton of blame, saying like, you have no business being in this situation. If you are second guessing, you look scared before you're shooting. And I saw a lot of actual snipers comment on this footage, and they're like, people are acting like all the time when you've got something in a scope that it is clear as day, like you're seeing it on a 40-inch TV, what you're aiming at.
Right.
It's not that simple. And you got to look at it from the perspective of them. If there's been nothing coming up to your channels, so like you've got a radio in, and there's nothing coming up about, hey, we got a possible shooter in this area. We've got a possible shooter in this area. Guy with a gun is here. If that communication is not coming through, okay, and you're doing your due diligence, you're scanning your perimeter, and then all of a sudden you think you see something on the roof, and then you line up and you train your line of sight. You now have this shooter potentially in your scope, but depending on the angle, because we don't have an exact angle from where he's at, you're trying to look, depending on how clear your line of sight is, you have no idea. Like, who's to say that could just be another police officer going to,
or it's one of the things that I heard was, well, what if that's just somebody who wanted to get a better view to see the president?
So that was one of the arguments I saw, is like, again, before people are like, no, you can fucking tell the difference. I get it. But let's say that's just a reporter with a camera with a very long scope that, is kind of trying to aim, and you can't really see from 150, 200 meters out. You can't see what it is. And then God forbid, before you actually confirm that this is someone with a gun, you shoot and kill some 20-year-old, that it's not a rifle. Let's say it was a camera. And then all of a sudden you shoot 20 feet behind the president. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
where they were, and the pandemonium, the chaos that's going to break out. You have to be right in that situation. Because here's the thing, we on the news we give cops a lot of flack about being wrong in a lot of situations, and a lot of these snipers were talking about how there have been times where they think they've seen something, they're not sure, they're trying to hone in, and boom, that's what, shots are being already shot at them. So I think that sniper had great reaction time. Obviously,
Well, yeah,
didn't miss.
the video. I mean, here's the thing with all of these, and I'll just call it what it is, conspiracy theorists who are putting these things out there. They're basing it on all of these cell phone videos. We're piecing together. So this is our evidence. We're basing our ironclad evidence based upon cell phone video, and we've seen, the two shooter thing. We've seen every piece of discussion we've heard has been, it came from that guy. We saw that guy. When it's a failure from top to bottom, and I'll start with this too. The local law enforcement was severely understaffed. They were severely understaffed, and so when Trump's people, and this came out in the Washington Post, that when Trump's people asked local law enforcement, okay, hey, are we good? And Trump's people include his Secret Service detail. Local law enforcement's like, we do not have the manpower that you're needing, because this wasn't like this was in Pittsburgh. This is in Butler, Pennsylvania, out in Bumblefudge. Okay, and so then Trump's detail talks to Secret Service and says, can you spare us more? Which is actually the next clip I want to get to, because this was the smoking gun. I'll just play this, and hopefully you can hear this one a little bit better, Sean. We'll see.
Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, the assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false. The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said that is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed. But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this: Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me.
So that's damning evidence. And she's like, well, we didn't deny it. Well, your guy said that you denied. So which is it? And I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, if this, and they asked her, I don't think I have this clip, but they asked her earlier. They said, and they actually had I see the clip now that I was watching, but I don't have it pulled up. But there was one of the representatives that said, "You're full of shit," and said it told her that on. But she said, "Is the Secret Service a political organization?" She's like, "No." She said, "Our job is to protect the protectees, to protect the presidents, and to do this and so." So why didn't you had an actual person who says, we denied Trump's people. Why did you deny Trump's people when you're law enforcement, and granted, these guys show up way ahead of time. It's not like, hey, we're going to pop up and be Johnny on the spot and we're going to. They knew that it wasn't like, oh, the night before, we're not going to have enough guys. Could you send some guys over? Mm-hmm. That's a major failure.
Yeah, I remember years and years and years ago, when I still lived in Iowa, when George Bush was running against John Kerry. John Kerry was doing a rally in Dubuque, Iowa, and like 2 weeks before the actual rally, the Secret Service was going through the downtown and getting up on roofs to just check to see, where they were going to be. And I don't know if they actually did or not, but I'd have to ask my dad. But I want to say they had posted up snipers on top of the roof where my dad was working at the time. Whenever the rally was in town, they do their due diligence. They go through and yeah, usually, they set these, these events are planned out. They're set up. They usually do the due diligence to ensure. And I'm almost wondering, this is one of those things where it's someone look at it and say, no one's dumb enough to get up on that spot because it's way too fucking in the open for anybody to, no one's going to run up there and go ahead because we've got our eyes on it from other angles. And clearly someone saw it and said, because I'm interested to see if we're ever going to, Joe Schmo, you and I, if we're ever actually going to hear of what they were able to get from his cell phone. How much planning did this kid actually put into this? Did he just go, I'm rolling up there with my rifle and seeing if I can get a chance to take a shot?
I saw a report. Let me see who it was, but I think I saw a report yesterday that the kid scouted the area with his drone. Let me see real quick if I can.
And which is crazy is, did he scout it? Did they say he scouted it during the event?
No. Okay, so it says, yep, here we go. AP News. Trump rally shooter flew drone over event site hours before the attack.
So what's crazy about that to me is that they didn't have, at that point, they had already not had signal jammers and everything set up on site, which is crazy.
Explain to us what you mean by when you say signal jammers.
Okay, so as we've seen in the Russian and the Ukraine war, right? It's poor man's Air Force is using UAVs or these drones, these cheap, get them from Amazon, $100 drones, to load them up with explosives. They can drop mortars. They can pack C4 on them and fly them into people. They're poor man's Air Force. So the way that we stop these UAVs is essentially just jamming the signal of them. So at these political rallies, and if they're not, holy cow. So they run off of, I'm going to just dumb it down super simply. Let's just essentially call it a radio frequency. It might not be a radio frequency, but let's just call it a radio frequency. Mm-hmm. And we have the ways that we can stop these drones from flying over an area is there are devices that we can use that shoot off a signal that overpowers the signal that's coming from, let's just say, your remote control or your phone, however you're piloting this drone, it can essentially stop that, which would then land the drone. So if he scouted it just a couple of hours, what that tells me, as someone that or they weren't present during the event, or they're not using really powerful stuff. Like, because again, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. They like sometimes soldiers are equipped. It almost looks like this futuristic, not like a ray gun, but almost looks like a big overgrown
and it's got
hair
like
dryer.
And you
can just bring it down.
Okay,
so
that's
I'm
what
sure
those
that
are.
on site they probably had some people there, but they also have like actual, like people that are sitting down at a computer that are just, they have machines that are, let's just say, covering a certain range, because if anything comes in there, boom, they're knocking them down. Like, that's why that first year of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russia was struggling, is because like the Ukrainians were able to pick them off. Like, I'm sure that you guys have seen it, our listeners, I'm sure you've seen footage of like Russian convoys just getting obliterated, one after the other. Like, Russia was not able to really make a serious movement. And the reason why is they were just using like handheld radios. So America told the Ukrainians, this is how you read. So they heard everything that Russians were saying, all their frequencies. Like, it's not crazy advanced technology. And so, it's a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of the stuff that we use nowadays have really basic encryption. Like, did you know if you have Ring, for example, like a Ring video doorbell, or you use that home security,
anybody can patch in
well, not only that, but you can go to Amazon and buy a $2 little clicker that will put off radio or radio frequencies, so that will basically, if you open a window that has a sensor connected to it, you just press that button and you open it and close it, and that system will never know that window opened or shut. This is not like, a lot of these things are really, really basic and inexpensive, which that's a whole different conversation for another day, about Russia and the Ukraine, and even what China's doing with their drones is interesting. But it's so if he's out there just hours beforehand, just to get a quick scouting to see what's going on, like, that is, again,
that's
and
crazy.
Especially if they're already set up. Like, if I'm a police officer, or if I'm Secret Service, and all of a sudden I just see a drone flying through there, like, your first reaction should be, something's collecting intel. We need to relay that up the channels of like, hey, we're still good, but something was scanning the area this morning.
Yeah, that's crazy. The last thing I'm going to play before we talk about our other issue briefly, this is Representative Moskowitz. I think this guy was from Florida, I believe. He's represented from one of the Florida districts, and he brings up another good point. So we'll play what he has to say.
There's going to be accountability. I understand you don't want to give us names. When you say that, are you telling the committee that once it's concluded, you're prepared to fire the people on the ground who made poor decisions that day?
I'm prepared to take the actions necessary.
No, that's nonsense. Okay. Accountability. The failure was human. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they failed that day, and a former president was almost assassinated. Okay. Are you prepared to fire the human failure on the ground? Yes or no? When you have the names of where those failures were, they're people. It's not like a piece of technology failed. It was people who failed that day. Are you prepared to fire them?
I don't have an answer as to whether.
Well, then how can there be accountability if you're not prepared to fire someone? And the reason why your name is going to be the person who's held accountable, the reason why members in this committee are calling for resignation, and I join in that, or for the president to fire you, is because you're saying there's going to be accountability, but you can't commit that people are going to get fired.
That was and that's another thing. That's the last thing I really wanted to. How much is the buck going to be passed on this? Because I saw an interview of the local county sheriff. He's like, my guys did everything that they were supposed to do. My guys did everything, and who's going to take the responsibility? Somebody's got to take the responsibility, because this Secret Service lady, she's been, I'll just call it what it is. She's been pretty obstinate, and from some of the stuff that I've seen and I've watched in her testimony, she's been pretty. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm good. No, you failed pretty bad. Go back to what you said earlier. Think about, let's go with worst case scenario if it would have happened. What happened if he would have had his brains blown out on live TV? Somebody's going to have to answer for that.
Yeah.
And the fact that this woman's not willing to step down and not willing to, I don't know.
And I feel like, as we kind of get into our next topic, I think it's kind of, ironically, I think Biden might be the first one in a line of these, people that is willingly stepping down from a, major position, when obviously there's a lot of red flags around the situation. Hell, it took the board of directors to kick Vince McMahon out when he was, yeah, when he was riding high on all the sexual assault allegations, and when TKO did their buyout. So it is now that the cat is out of the bag. And we do know that President Biden is not going to run for re-election. This is going to create a very unique. V, off the top of your head, has this happened before in?
So, from two instances,
obviously, since term limits have been set, I know that Washington said I'm not running again,
right?
When he could have, but
and one of the things that so 1968 was when President Johnson said I'm not running for re-election, and he was in the midst of the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't feel quality. He just had enough. And other than that, you had Gary Hart. So Gary Hart was a guy who had run for president. It was in 19. He was the president. Okay, so he was kind of in the same situation that Biden is in. They hadn't had the convention yet. Okay, so Gary Hart, who was a I forgot what he was. What was he? I'm trying to look for it here. But he had an extramarital affair that all these pictures came out with him but he was. It was before the election in 1988. Okay, so in 1988, the guy they had running against Bush, which they ended up throwing in there, was Michael Dukakis. Okay, Michael Dukakis. Gary Hart. It's like this. Gary Hart was going to win. George H.W. Bush. He wasn't the shining beacon that Ronald Reagan was, but he was strong. And Gary Hart was not a spring chicken.
Yeah.
But he was younger dude. He was younger dude, and so this guy, I'm trying to find the exact date of when it was that he dropped out. But it was So I'll just put this up for the people to see too. This was actually the photo that sunk Gary Hart. He was actually on a boat called the Monkey Business. So that'll that's always the one that'll do you in.
Naturally.
But it was before, it was in, I guess, so I'm guessing it was in 87 when this happened, because he, you know, he dropped out of the election, so then they put Michael Dukakis in there, and then Michael Dukakis gets absolutely destroyed because he's a buffoon and he had nothing on George H.W. So it has happened before. This situation was, it was similar. It was not exact. I mean, obviously there was, Gary Hart was a womanizer. Joe Biden is, when you look at, and I have here in the background, as behind us here, it says, just the key to it, it says, "I've been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it's the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duty as president for the remainder of my term." And he's going to speak to the nation later this week. And that's big of him. That is big of him. That is. But I was reading just this morning. I was reading that his staff found out minutes before he released it. Not.
Oh, I even saw some that were like, people read it, like they read it on Twitter is how they found out. And God, some, naturally some of the more wonky extremies out there are saying that Biden is already dead and that he needs to show his face by 5 p.m. today. Like, Lauren Boder has got to be one of the dumbest fucking people on earth. Like, my thing is, lady, you tried giving your man a hand job in the middle of a theater. Like, you have just shut up. Just ride the wave of whatever you're riding on and be gone. Like, be gone. But people forget, Biden has COVID, or had COVID, and is since recovering. And, now mind you, is the argument to be said, like, well, then who, like, if he has to recover, if it's going to take him several days before he can even address the nation? Because my thought on it was, he's taking his time, because if he's sick, we already know what his actual mental health status is. You throw COVID on top of that, the guy probably can't literally put mashed potatoes down his throat. You got COVID, you feel like garbage. Yeah, like, so I'm not surprised that he's waiting to speak openly until he is fully recovered. In that same breath, like, we should have done a temporary, like when he had his colonoscopy surgery, we should have had Kamala swear in and be like, I'm acting until he's functional.
And we've done that before.
Well, no, correct. That's what I'm saying, is like, Kamala, believe it or not, is technically has been the first ever woman president before, because of when she has had to take oath as the active president. And I remember the first time I saw about it was legit. Biden had a colonoscopy, which they put you out for. So while he was out for surgery during his recovery, which is like 24 hours, she was sitting president. So, I mean, there are things that should be done. I am interested. I saw a thing, and I hope it's not true, but I am interested to see if, now that Biden knows that he's not coming back, or, even, if he's known for a while, whatever the case may be, a couple things. I'm actually very interested to see if all of the things that he's been saying, like, hey, we're going to get done. I'm interested to see if he would risk it and put the presidential orders on some of those things. And because here's the thing.
He's got nothing to lose.
Well, that's the thing, is, he has nothing to lose. In case you forgot, he could even do shit that would technically be considered illegal and he now has
Presidential immunity. Yes.
immunity, brother.
Yes.
So, and here's the thing: is he could run he could run the chain on a bunch of things, and then just leave it to the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate to fucking deal with. He could say, "Boom, it's done." Now, mind you, if Kamala is the one that's going to be the nominee, that sets her up for failure because then Trump just goes, "What do you have to say about this? Like, what about this laundry list that Grandpa left for you to try to clean up?" So, but here's where we'll probably deep dive into this next week.
Yeah.
A little bit more. But one of the big things is we are less than 4 months. There's less than 100 days now, or we're about at 100 days until the election, and we do not have a nominee from the Democratic Party that was legitimately voted for by the American people. Okay, where if the person that's delegated, those delegates are not coming from the votes of the people. And I saw a very interesting thing that had the Democratic Party done it justice, because here's I don't want to get into the weaves on, because I am not so much a conspiracy theorist. However, how this is being handled towards the end here, of how essentially the DNC elites are putting whomever they want to be in that position, it raises a lot of red flags of like,
yes,
2020. Let's talk about those 81 million votes. Let's have a legitimate conversation about it, because for 4 years you guys have been trying. You've been saying one thing, and now look at how this situation has presented itself. And God forbid another record-breaking, number of people show up to vote, because I just, as crazy as it sounds, we talked about it 2 weeks ago, how things were not looking good for Biden. We talked about it because we hadn't had a show, but we talked about how the assassination attempt helped Donald Trump. Now we get into a situation where, even though I think Biden would have lost, I don't think there is anyone that the DNC legitimately believes that they can put into Biden's position to beat Donald Trump. The only person, and hey, all I'm saying is I don't think it's going to happen this year. But in 2028, you bet your bottom dollar, Michelle Obama is going to run for president.
If she does, her last name will get her in alone. Her last name. I mean,
that is why I was having this conversation with myself the other day, going like, there's no way they do that. There's no way that they go like, we have to just put the most popular person that we can do, because that's the thing is Michelle Obama is legitimately the only one that like everyone in the United States knows who she is. That's the thing is like people know who Kamala Harris is and they don't already like her. Like you cannot take the Democratic representative from Pennsylvania, put him on and go, this guy's going to beat Trump. It's not going to happen. Like you have to get a name brand. And it has to be Kamala. Kamala is the only one, and unfortunately, she's younger and just as inept as the guy with dementia. So.
And there is a short list. I was watching the news last night, and there's a short list of people, and we'll get more into this next week when we can go deeper dive into this, because I believe the Democratic National Convention starts next Thursday or Friday. So, but there is a short list of I saw 6 candidates, 6 pictures on the. One of them happened to be our lovely governor from Illinois, J.B. Pritzker.
Yep.
Your boy Gavin Newsom from out there in California was another one who was on that short list.
I don't know if it's on that list, but I've heard a name I keep seeing a lot that for Kamala to pick as a running mate is Mayor Pete.
Yeah,
I've seen his name pop up a lot. But here's the thing, God, you know how crazy it's gonna, because how does that again? not everything is Star Wars, but everything is Star Wars when, like, I'm going to nerd out a little bit. You look at when Chancellor Palpatine took his position. That was a clear stealing of democracy. All right, and this is what is happening at the DNC. They are again. To the people that have listened to our show for a long time, for for the people that we've spoken with, I am not one of those ones that has been on the conspiracy train. But good Lord, the way that this is setting up for the DNC to quite literally pick their nominee without the opinion of the people, that is a failure. That is a failure of democracy. And they're already turning that tide. The amount of like legitimate individuals I have seen that I'm sure they kept it to themselves, but are like, it's out with the old, in with the new. Donald Trump 78, Kamala, and it's like, a week ago we were talking about how Joe Biden can chew his food okay. Like, what are we talking about? So you've lost the narrative.
Oh, man.
You've lost the narrative to push that this guy's too old. And I don't know. I was looking forward to see the JD Vance Kamala debates. I was because
that would have been great. That would have been great.
So I was genuinely getting excited to see those debates happen. We're not now. If it's Kamala and Trump, like, Trump doesn't have to say anything.
No, he doesn't. He just has to go.
Mm-hmm. And so whoever her running mate is going to be, it's going to have to be. And all I'm saying is,
pack a lunch.
We talked about this years ago when the DNC ran Robert Kennedy Jr. out of the building. Could he have been the saving grace that the DNC needed in a situation like this? Maybe.
Yeah.
But they did him dirty, and now I am probably all week long going to have that committee playing in the background, because it'll be very interesting to see how the delegates from all these different states start, and there's going to be boos, and oh my God, it is going to be the one thing that I can say is even more so than in 2020. I think that there was a bigger divide amongst Republicans in 2020.
Democrats are going to have it this time around.
Democrats are going to rip themselves apart, and that's the thing is, some people said it best, Trump has a very 2008 Obama feel. This is everyone is on board, everyone is running full circle, and I tell you what, and this is something that I'm just saying, believe it or not, there are a lot of like-minded veterans that are very, I would say, like, not quite pro, like not quite union, but they vote kind of the same way unions do. They're very benefit-minded individuals, and the Teamsters are voting Republican this year.
Yes, yeah, that's nothing we'll cover next week. Yeah,
we will. But also, Trump has been asked about Project 2025, which I think is another thing we should talk about a little bit. A thing that I don't necessarily think is going to pass anyway, but even Trump has said that shit's too much. That they're doing way too much.
Yeah.
And you take that response and you show that to a lot of vets that are kind of on the fence because their vote goes where the benefits go, and you have Trump saying that that's not something that he's on board with. That opens up a lot of doors, and
needless to say, we have enough material to cover a couple podcasts for the next few weeks.
Oh, 100%.
So, anyway, everybody, thank you for joining us. Episode 1 of Season 4, Voice of Reason in the books.
A great way to premiere it. And yes, as we continue to drive things home, as we get closer to election week, be here, stay informed, do your due diligence.
Definitely.
And we can't stress that enough. Now is the time more than ever to do your due diligence. Go on the websites, try a bunch of different ones. You can go to CNN.com, Fox.com, PBS, and just type in, go to the vote section and start to read about some of these candidates and with where your thoughts align. Look, there's you might be surprised. I've been surprised before at where my
Where
own political,
right.
my where I
Where
was
you're
kind
at
of
on
with.
the spectrum, right?
Yeah, so definitely look at it and be informed. Vote, vote in your local elections. Those are coming up. Those are, if not even more important, vote on your local elections. And yeah, and again, from the bottom of our heart, it's been an awesome 4 years, and we're only going to keep them coming. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for listening, and I'm sure you guys are going to hear from us next week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Check out our previous shows and clips on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.